Okay, so we're online. Let's see if the sound works and then we can start.
Order, yes. Okay, so the yellow, red. Okay, so maybe a little bit less here. Mic level, I don't know, 65. Is it? It's on the right. There's like a. Okay, so I think we can start, and I hope you can all hear us well now on the stream. Is it fine? The sound quality. 1, 2, 3.
I'm not sure for 100%.
You're not sure, okay. Okay, I hear something. Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but I think this is probably already not the codec issue, so it's fine. Okay, guys, thank you all for coming. I guess we will have a bit more guests coming later, but I will start regardless. Yeah, so we have our 9th event actually this year, and it seems like it's really unpredictable in terms of how many people are coming, because it's went up and down several times. But I guess that's fine, and we are still. I will tell you what we're trying to do, and yeah, maybe you can invite your friends. That would be super great if you find what I'm gonna tell you useful or interesting. So about our community, basically, we are trying to build a community here, like a high-quality common ground for tech industry to come and discuss important things on a regular basis. So we do it every month. This is issue number 9. So we try to do it every month, and basically, right now we're doing this presentations format, and in the future we also want to experiment more with different formats like decentralized events, more crypto talks, make it more community driven so anyone can start their speeches and talks and so on, have more networking, of course, and yeah, basically we need to implement new formats as we go. And the idea of this event is also to make a framework for great communities that people could use in the future to start their own community, or for a company to start their own community, and basically do it in the shape and form that will lie basis for the city of the future. That's at least the idea. And always we need more volunteers. I think you could see that. We always have some struggles with volunteers. I believe I did a new slide with that. Yes, I did. So basically we need 5 categories of volunteers that we want to focus on. And these 5 categories is help physically here, if you're in Oslo, if you're staying in Oslo, or if you can come to Oslo. That's a location-based help. That's very important. Also, we need volunteers for our social network posts, because we tend to do them once or twice a month, which is, we think, not enough. So we also need the most help probably we need with the speaker outreach, because that quest was really hard. And we found a lot of good speakers, but they already given speech here. So we sometimes invite them back, and some of them actually did two speeches and so on, but it's kind of limited market, and you have to do proactive speaker outreach, and also if somebody flies from another country, if they're in Oslo, so we need to try to catch with them and try to ask if they are interested in giving a talk. So we need a speaker outreach here help, and we also need two types of help, which is kind of similar, like we need help with photos and videos for these events. All right. What else? We have our partners here, so thank you Ripple for giving us this awesome room. Also thank you Norwegian Unix User Association for our video streaming equipment that we have here. Also we have a couple of media partners. And this is what we did so far. So I believe, yes, so today is 20th December, if I remember correctly. Do not check the date on the entrance screen. It sometimes lives on a different planet, in a different timeline. So, because if you've seen the DeLorean in there, so you know some of the places in this building live in a different timeline. So the screen can show wrong dates, but today is 20th December, I believe, so it should be all good. And we had all of these events, except for these two reds, all of these events so far, and we plan to have more. Yes, so we also have these streams, which we are trying to find the best workflow for, and we constantly improve it every time, but we also kind of change it every time, because this room actually also lives its own life, and it changes all the time a little bit, so we have to catch up with the changes in this room. I mean, technical equipment changes a little bit, it's mood, I guess. So we have a sort of challenge here. But we are trying to do our best again, and here are our socials. If you are not following some of them, you can always do that. Also, I want to do like a small recap, again, speaking about what we did so far. I think I actually forgot to add a couple of numbers, but we have hosted 9 events. We accommodated over 200 participants. There has been 24 speakers talking with us and with you guys about important topics, over 30 gigs of videos. I think it's more like 40, 50 gigs actually, hundreds of photos, 20 or more announcements, and of course we would like to have more of these nice stuff, so please do it, do the photos, join our community, and let's try to make more tech meetups in Oslo, because I think we need them. Yeah, these are some photos from our past events, and we actually even hosted some of them in different locations, but we are so far staying here. Maybe it would change the next year, so some teasering, and we might try new formats in new locations. Maybe in January, maybe in February, we will see how it goes. I'm really hoping for the January, and we will also try to make like a larger event with several communities invited, like Women in Tech, our friendship community that we worked with before. So we will try to invite more people and make like a more networking event, I think in January. That's the plan. That is it for this short introduction speech, and without further ado, I will just move forwards with our main topic of today, which I think is quite interesting and should be relevant. So I think you all come to hear about it, because actually I think it's like, you know, you will see what I mean a bit further in the presentation about relevance of this, but it gets more and more relevant every day. So the speech will be about how spec ops invade privacy and open source fights back. So personally, I think we have. Okay, I'm already starting the presentation. So let's first switch the slide. So this is the plan. What I'm going to talk about today. So I will define the problem in the beginning. I will tell a little bit about the state of the market. Then we will compare a little bit closed source and open source Gen AI and AI models. We will talk about impact of proprietary AI in surveillance, and we will also talk about the role of open source AI itself. And we will talk about restricting government outreach, building awareness around that, and how we can mitigate the problem defined in Chapter 1. And I will also post some links for the reading, which are quite useful if you are into these. So, the problem is as follows. Governments are already leveraging proprietary AI solutions for mass surveillance. To be clear, not only proprietary, and actually most of the proprietary solutions are based off of open source. However, there's more and more proprietary solutions, and governments are leveraging them. Sometimes you can argue it's fine, but I will describe why it's not always a good thing. Of course, there's lack of transparency in AI systems used for monitoring and control. So that's another issue. That's another part of the same problem, actually. There's also overreach of governments or spec ops teams. If you know what spec ops is, it's like military things. It's like special operations. So it's like agencies that do some research, NSA, and things like that. So I will talk a little bit deeper into that later in these presentations. Also, AI is used for warfare now, and this is already the reality. Well, some may say it's good, some may say it's bad. Well, it's a big debate. I would say it's probably not good, but warfare should not exist whatsoever. That's my opinion in general. But of course, as it does exist, so people are using it. So describing the problem further on is basically we have these. You've probably seen these slides that Edward Snowden, like ages ago, 11 years ago, I think now, revealed. These slides are even older. This is probably 2007 or 2008, I believe. So the PRISM program. Who heard about PRISM program? No one? One? Okay, so yeah, well, in short, PRISM is NSA program where the basically concept is that most of the traffic, doesn't matter voice, audio, pictures, any type of traffic, text, goes through US channels. And it's actually, there is a reason for that. There's like an infrastructure reason for that, because infrastructure-wise, the traffic always chooses the cheapest path. And cheapest path is often from US, because US have so many competitors, which is kind of good for US, I guess. But they also use it to capture this traffic that goes along. And basically all countries go through US in some or the other way. And they use it, they had this, like agreements with all these companies, and now it's even much more. I don't know if there's updated presentation. And this is leaked presentation, obviously it's like top secret presentation. So probably there is some updates to this presentation. I am not sure, but there is a lot of companies. There is more than 20 tech giants. I think last time it was at least. Okay, and these are the countries that are sharing the data. So another part of this problem is that there is a thing, so there's a data sharing agreement. There's a thing called ICE, or I think it started with 5 eyes, then it went to 9 eyes, and then 14 eyes. So basically these are the countries that are part of the agreement to share agency data between them. So basically any data that they scrape through the internet, it can be OSINT, which is like open source intelligence, but it also can be closed-int, so internal intelligence. And some of them, they are shared. And Norway became a part of this agreement when it started to be a part in 9 eyes. So in the middle of this program, right now, I think it's above 14 eyes realistically, because there's 5 or 6 more countries that are partially in this agreement. So like Israel and some other countries. So I think it's more like 20 eyes. So basically, these are the list of the countries that will strongly follow you and share whatever they see inside of their agencies, right? Of course, there's another side to this story, which is like China and Russia. And like partially, they also have a similar agreements. And there probably are Oceania trackers or agencies and so on. So there are several of these, but this is the one we know about a lot, so that's why I can talk about it. That was the second part of the problem. Let's speak now about AI. AI is the third part of the problem, because before that, it's been a tedious manual work to do, even with all of these automated tools that scrape the internet traffic for you, decrypt some of the SSL certificates, use the fake SSL certificates, man-in-the-middle attacks, whatever is happening. It was the manual process. So yes, you get a lot of data, but you have to do the analytics yourself. Now we have AI. And actually, in 2019, there is a research saying that at least 75 countries already used AI for surveillance. So I think this is the problem. And actually, if you can see this like market grow, this is for AI and video surveillance, and this is 232. So you can clearly see. So we are here So in like 6, 7, 8 years, it's gonna grow 2-fold at least, and we don't know if this is correct, of course, but we can predict it's sort of correct, okay? And yes, so these are the countries in white, unfortunately in white, that are part of these AI surveillance programs. Some, of course, they are sometimes internal, only internal. Some of them are cross-border, some of them are part of these agreements to share the data between the countries. So the situation is kind of like that. We have our PRISM, we have our Fortinize, we have AI. What is out of that? So again, dominance of closed and proprietary AI systems, they are usually provided by corporations, and the corporations themselves, they have a lot of closed source products and closed source processes to develop that. So it's completely intransparent. We also have a rapid adoption of AI, which is not bad by itself, but it's adopted for surveillance and cyber operations, which is very, very gray or black topic, depends on how you look at it, but I would say at least it's gray, so it's very, very, like a lot of secret documents related to that, and people don't have enough transparency about what governments are doing with AI and what actually they're applying. For example, China has been more than 10 years, I believe, in mass surveillance. So they do mass surveillance. They, like in Europe, you know, there's a cameras that follow the traffic with cars and people, and there's no recognition of faces. It's just used for the purpose of traffic navigation. So improving like streets, improving how cars go, removing traffic jams. It's used for that. But in China, the same systems used to detect every person that is going on the street and what is he doing. And if he's behaving weirdly, maybe he's like crushing bottles or something, and automatic alert. And this is the reality that we're going to, not only in China, but it seems like in other countries. And there are some movements from governments to kind of enforce on people in regards, oh, we are so unprotected, we should protect our kids, we should protect ourselves, let's just do a total surveillance of everything. And people take it. A lot of people take it. Yeah, and of course there is limited availability of open source alternatives that are adopted, because if there would be open source solutions adopted, we could at least look at what is taken, which data is taken, where this data is taken, how this data is taken, how it's handled, and so on and so forth, if that would be open source. Some of the solutions, of course, are open source, but the least amount of them, unfortunately. So, speaking forward, to simplify classification, we can divide AI software into 3 categories. One will be fully proprietary, so it's closed licensing, hard limits, everything like that. We can say semi-open, which is actually like, I think most companies and most businesses fell into this category, and there's completely open source, open licensing, no limitations. So these 3 models. And of course, depending on how you look at it, you can, I would personally say that this category actually belongs inside of this, but of course there are some open parts, so you can do like a spot checks on some processes when you are here, and you can do checks on everything when you are here, but you cannot, this is like just a black box, right? So these are 3 different AI software existing in the market, 3 categories of AI software existing in the market. And I would like to speak a little bit about open source itself, like for you to understand. So why open source is important. So first of all, open source, as I already said, gives a lot of transparency to whatever tooling, to processes, to everything, because you can like look at the code, you can look what does it do, or if you cannot look at the code, you can ask somebody to look at it. It's also community-driven development, so everyone benefits from this development. It's more customizable, it's more feature-rich, it's more secure because more people look into the code and into the processes. It's more cost-effective, always. There is no vendor lock-in, so you can adapt it to your needs. It's way more lasting way longer. It's more sustainable because of that, and it's actually more sustainable because of many of these points. It's more licensely clean. So speaking about licenses, there's like a lot of them, and there's a lot of debate between compatibility. So open source licenses are way cleaner and way simpler to use. There is also a question of ethical use and ownership around AI tooling. And of course, there is a question of interoperability and compatibility between the tools. And with open source solutions, you have it out of the box, so to say. And education and skill development, basically, as you have an open box, you can also look at it like as a child, if you have like a toy that you know, like a break, and to see how it works. So open source is that toy that gives you this possibility to do that, right? So there's a lot of benefits to open source. Speaking about AI, open source help us to take back the control, basically, right? So now let's discuss two domains. So first domain I want to discuss is AI models. And in this domain, we of course have proprietary AI models and we have open source AI models. And basically, their like differences are basically the list that I just announced, but higher cost of proprietary solutions, limited customizations, less support, usually less information about performance optimization. It could be really optimized, but we don't know how it's optimized and what does it do inside. So that's a black box nature, basically. Sometimes it can be integrated with the enterprise tools. The problem with proprietary solutions is that they usually integrate goodly in a good way with different proprietary tools. So you're like locked down in this paid garden like Apple do. And you have to pay to this company, to that company, to that company, and they have your data, and you pay them. Why? And of course, regulatory compliance, there is some regulatory compliance to proprietary companies, but it's way easier in open source. Again, innovation cycle the same, so because open source software is developing very, very quickly, it actually have a shorter innovation cycle, so you get developments earlier on. There is no vendor login in open source, but there is a higher vendor login in proprietary AI models most of the time, and it's way less scalable. So this is speaking about AI models. You have to understand that AI, like a concept in itself, it has like a lot of subcategories, and AI models is kind of like, let's say, like the framework, how it's developed, right? So the general framework. So this is comparing like a closed framework to open framework. Let's move on. Another thing we need to consider is Gen AI. And Gen AI means more like a generative AI. So this means if the previous was a framework, when it has a basis of everything like a platform, Gen AI is instead a solution that is already made for you as an end user to use it or utilize it. Okay. So there is the same columns. It's reverse actually, but open source on the left and closed source on the right. So a lot of these points are actually similar or the same. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but of course, open source solutions are way cheaper. They are more customizable. The learning curve in open source, well, it's a big debate. Some people say yes, it's kind of high learning curve, but it depends on your knowledge and it depends on your past experience, and also because all of the ecosystem is open, there is more materials. So I would personally say, even if learning curve is steep, but there's a lot of like milestones and help along this learning curve. There's YouTube videos, everything around it. For proprietary solutions, it depends on the Gen AI model in this particular case, right? So a lot of similar things that could be applied to the end product the same way as to the framework solution. So this is like more like an end product. Okay. Another thing is, so you can see here some examples of the models, right? And you can see that there's not one trigger like open source, closed source. No, there's many things. So there's model architecture, training data, model weights, there's checkpoints, optimization, and there's licensing. So basically for each model, you can have all of these things differently. And you can see that not a lot of tools actually have everything open. So a lot of companies, they say, yeah, this is our private property because we developed it, although they took open source model, probably from Facebook or somebody, but they took the open source model. Yes, there are maybe they fiddled with weights, with customizations, but probably they took the best optimizations from the market. So what they actually did, they did some customizations to the workflow, to the pipeline, but what they use as a pipeline, most of the time it's open source tooling for the pipeline or it's a closed source tooling for the pipeline, but they took it from another company. So they just take solutions from several companies, either open source or closed source, different solutions, and they combine into a proprietary product most of the time. Of course, in case of with OpenAI, maybe it's not this case, but it's the case with the smaller ones at least. Okay, so also we have another example here with like NVIDIA and Meta trying to push a little bit. This is just a bit more generalized. So realistically, a lot of code of Meta or NVIDIA is not fully open source, but at least they're trying to push it a little bit. And we have Hugging Face, which is an awesome platform. We have other AI-related things. And we have like closed source, and funny enough, OpenAI is here, right? What is open about OpenAI? Nothing is open about OpenAI. If you look at this, there is nothing. So it's literally just lying to your face. And I mean, it used not to. It was more open. GPT-3, before that era, it used to be open, but it's not anymore. Because they realized, I guess, like the market value, and they were the first player. So for them, the market value is even higher, because as a first player, they get a lot of marketing, and people are going to use it regardless if it's open source, closed source, or something even else. So this is another side of this problem, right? And of course, speaking a little bit about AI agents, because this is like where the market is going. On the left, we have these two columns again, and on the left of this left column, so there is open source solutions, and you can see that in some domains, the amount of like companies and solutions are exactly almost the same, or if you look in the market, it's probably going to be the same. But in some domains, like in some other domains, like more environmental, more deployment tooling for developers, there's a lot of gaps in the open source for some reason. Usually, actually, it's the other way around, but in this case, there's a lot of gaps that needs to be filled. So there's more proprietary solutions, and I think a lot of these proprietary solutions are actually very young. They are extremely young. They are not at all developed, so they are maybe very buggy, but they are trying to capture the market. So they are going to the market trying to sell their thing. And a lot of times these tooling are just using such like some other companies, like they are interconnected. So a lot of the time that people actually don't do a lot of development, okay? So returning to AI surveillance, on the right, we can see that basically there's a lot of companies that are doing like working on AI surveillance tooling, like China and US, basically these countries, and then in China and US, there's a lot of leading companies that work with AI surveillance. And there's also the trend of basically quite high adoption of AI surveillance in every region, basically. I mean, in Africa, it's probably not that much, but in all other regions, it's like 50% or so. This is terrifying, and especially it's terrifying if it's closed source solutions that nobody knows how they work. Okay, so what is the impact of that? So already I told you about the black box, so we don't have any public control of what is happening. Another slide from Prism, you can see here. And instead of fostering innovation and sharing knowledge, we bump into juridical limitations and licensing issues. And of course governments are spending our money to do that. And this is a lose-lose situation, because government takes money from people in theory to improve the society, but a lot of times they do the reverse. They use this money on whoever knows what. And do you guys think that would have some long-lasting effects in the future? Who thinks this is a little bit terrifying? Okay, yeah. So I will show you my perspective on that. And actually, you can see like this is 2013, and US used 20 million per year in this program. This is just US. And then, 20 million is nothing for spec ops in the US, but it's 11 years ago now. They spend way more, and a lot of countries are joining that. And I already showed you like it's 14 eyes or 20 eyes nowadays. So okay, let's move on. So this is the long-term effect. Realistic, unfortunately, this is the long-term effect. So I'm going to read you the description, and you might just realize if that's the story, right? George Orwell's 1984 is a dystopian novel set in a totalitarian society ruled by the party and its leader, Big Brother. The party exercises complete control over every aspect of life, including thoughts, through constant surveillance, propaganda, and the manipulation of truth and history. Individual freedoms are non-existent, and independent thinking is considered a crime, thought crime. The story follows Winston Smith, a disillusioned party worker, as he secretly rebels against the oppressive regime and seeks truth and freedom, only to face betrayal. The novel explores theme of power, control, and the dangers of authoritarianism. So, I would say right now, what is here? So we have our surveillance, constant surveillance. Due to AI, it is possible now, it's almost free for governments. Propaganda, yes, we do have that now. Manipulation of the truth of history. Like, I have a lot of friends in different communities. I have friends in Norway, I have Norwegian friends in Norway, I have expats friends in Norway. I have expats other countries, I have local friends from other countries, I have friends from Russia, I have friends all over the world. And I listen to their opinions, and I take them, like, just listen to them basically. And to any question, of course, there's like, like strong questions have usually polar decisions, right? Like any question about war, let's say about Israel war, so you can go with Israel or you can go with Palestine. I would personally don't go one way or the other, but most of the people says, oh, we should go this way, this is why, we should go this way, this is why. Of course, oftentimes they are from these countries, or they have a friend from these countries. But also, sometimes it's reverse, like, it could be reverse. Some people from Palestine could protect Israel, and the other way around. And this makes total sense, actually, because there's no such thing as a government, there's no such thing as a country. It's all fake concepts. There's just people, and people want to live in peace realistically. So this is scary, and this is what we are already dealing with. I didn't thought it's going to be that early. So, okay, let's go on. So again, AI systems are used more and more to track individuals, to monitor accounts, and to invade privacy. Speaking a little bit about tracking individuals, we also can speak about finance markets. Of course, the standard old finance is now failing, that's good. But the new finance, which is DeFi or crypto, is growing, which is really good. However, there's like central banks, and there's a concept of every country now trying to get into crypto, almost every country, and they will get eventually. But instead of realizing the private crypto like Monero or Dash or Zcash or anything like that, they are realizing their own assets like XRP or some other, their own like private ledgers that use to transfer transfer value or monetary value of any kind, and they can track it. So they just make their own blockchain where they can track everything. So this is actually like reverse of the concept. So they're just utilizing blockchain technology because it's cheaper, quicker, faster, simpler, and it's open source, but they use it to actually improve their own tracking. So realistically, like crypto would solve your problem if you use it in the correct way, but a lot of people don't know how, unfortunately. So people need to educate themselves. Another example of potential misuse and ethical concerns is that basically this data, a lot of times when this data is gathered, we have no ways of declining, because this is the cameras on the street in one country. Okay, maybe in Norway it's not that bad, maybe it's disallowed, you can only have an internal recording, you don't click, you have everything isolated, that's right. But then you travel to, I don't know, Taiwan, Malaysia, Singapore, and there's like cameras everywhere, and they just feed the stream into this AI system, and you can do nothing about it. Not travel? Maybe, I don't know, live under the sea. It could be, but again, inability to opt out. How would you opt out? Well, maybe you are wearing like a mask all the time, but would you want to do it? I don't know. I don't like it personally. Okay, so governments also can implement AI agents to persuade their political goals and steer public opinions and mass-generated human-like comments reviews. So this is like an issue with, because earlier times, like 10 years ago in Russia, when this like a conflict arise, it used real people. Like a lot of people were sitting and typing comments to like pursue their opinion, like to force people to change the opinion the way they wanted. So it's called the troll factory. In Russia we call it troll factory. So there was a lot of troll factory. It's also in the other countries as well. It's just an example that I know about, so I'm speaking about it. So these troll factories are doing something like they are given orders from the government or from some body of the government or organ of the government, and they're doing something. They think they do good. Okay, well, but now it gets way cheaper. You had to hire hundreds of people and pay them salaries, even if it could be not too high of a salaries, like writing comments, but it has to be salary. Now, instead, you can just put an NVIDIA Tesla rack, like in the corner of your room. Yeah, it could cost $20,000, but if you think about it, $20,000 is like a yearly salary of one person. And this rack can generate almost unlimited comments from almost unlimited accounts. So it's getting way cheaper to make this trolling happen. So people can't really distinguish between what is truth and what is not. Like this, all this noise around US having UFOs now. Who heard the news about US having UFOs? Yeah, okay, so more than half of you. So, is it real? Did we see anything? Is it generated? Is it tries to steer people to some? I mean, if alien come, I would be personally really glad Finally. But I think, unfortunately, that's not the case. And yeah, some people say it's a governmental project. The other people say this technology has been a lot of time before, just now it's released, and so on. And I think you have 10 opinions, and all of them are wrong. This is horrible. Okay, so also I already told about AI is being used in warfare. That is pretty obvious. I mean, a lot of automated systems used in warfare before, but now it's a little bit more dangerous because it has to be a person that giving a command to, shoot or kill or do the objective or whatever. Now it's not. This is the most horrible part. At least not in some countries, not with some products, and you can make your own robot that will do whatever you say, or maybe this robot could even kill you, but if you're not careful enough, because it wants to make a better world, So, and it would be totally valid point, actually. So, almost nothing can be accounted. Again, returning to the problem with the open source versus proprietary systems, you cannot account for anything in the proprietary system. So even if they say it's accounted for and it's counted and they show the data, but realistically they can gather more data, so we cannot trust it. So yeah, as I just told, governments are already launching these armies of agents, AI agents, because they are cheaper, faster, more reliable than hundreds of workers. And if these agents are proprietary, we cannot track them, we cannot know what they're doing, and I'm not sure that they're going to filter anything. They're just going to use it as is, as the proprietary companies provide the software. So, now switching a little bit to the bright side. If we have an open source AIs, open source processes, it could of course improve transparency, as I already told, and accountability in AI systems. It could help individuals and communities to understand and control AI technologies, so we can see what actually it does under the hood, or we can at least look and we can try to understand. And of course, we have kind of a couple of examples of community projects, either fully open source or mostly open source. Some of them are here. There's actually a lot of speeches now. Like a couple of months ago, I've seen a lot of events around making AI for good, trying to push some incentives, government incentives or private incentives. A lot of times it's private or like funds incentives to make a framework that will still allow to work on AI, but will allow to do it in a good way. And I would say even if you use open source AI for a bad thing, at least you can kind of have an understanding and control over it. So I would argue that, yeah, a lot of people say, oh, open source is like, it opens up all of the Pandora's box of issues. Yes, that's true, but the thing, in reality, it's too late already. We already have a lot of tooling outside of the box. We have a lot of possibilities, a lot of hardware. So there's no return from that situation. So the best we can do is the more this box gets open. So we should actually like reveal it entirely, remove this lid from this Pandora's box, and just let it all out, and then find a way to, like sort things that are in this box. So what else we can do? We can discuss restricting government and companies' outreach. So we can propose policies to limit the scope of governmental spec ops teams. Well, this is happening already, but I think this is happening, unfortunately, with only some countries and some jurisdictions, and of course, a lot of countries just ignore it. For instance, China will mostly ignore it. US will say that they're not going to ignore it, but they're realistically going to ignore it. Advocating for legal frameworks to ensure ethical use of AI in governments. So there's actually already some indexes, AI Global Surveillance Index, AGES, or I don't know how they are supposed to pronounce it, but you can track these indexes and see where the market is kind of going. Also, predicting the future with the large AI models trained on real social network data. You remember what I just referenced with Orwell, right? So these thought crimes. So basically, you can look at the community, a particular community, and generate what's going to happen. Of course, it's a probabilistic, but the problem with probabilistic, if your model is good enough, then the highest probability that the model outputs will be the highest probability. So it will match. So then most likely it's going to happen, right? And then what do you do with that? So if you know that something bad will happen, would you act on it? This is like a lot of ethical concerns. And yeah, so these regulations might help in some jurisdictions with strong juridical systems, but again, if it has to go through court, if it has to go through slow system, it's probably not going to be stopped by that. So what to do in this case? I don't really have an answer. I don't know. That's just a thought, food for thought, basically. That's this presentation is just giving you some ideas to think about and try to get some ideas of what's possible to be done. So building awareness and resistance. So what I think we should do is we should ensure that 100% of system stacks that we use and subsystems are fully open source. Important part, there is a software part, there's a hardware part, and oftentimes people forgot about one or the other, but they are strongly tied together, because what is the price of our software encryption if we have a powerful hardware that can decrypt it, and the other way around? There is no realistic value in trying to encrypt something if we don't have control over all of the pieces, ideally. And the funny part, we have open source hardware, we have open source switches, we have open source web servers, we have open source operating systems like on this laptop. We have a lot of things that are open source, and we can control these things, we can safely deliver software. It's just not used everywhere. So what I would say, ideally, if we're using AI, if we're using some mission critical things like hospitals or whatnot, we should ensure that all of our pipelines, software and hardware, uses open source. And these open source pipelines are not certificated per se, but maybe for medical it should be certificated, but it should be pass some of the automated certification, so to say. So there should be automated tests that it should pass, and it should do it. It's not a one-time pass, right? It should do this testing every time new version is deployed, and new version ideally should deploy it several times every day. So this testing has to happen every day. So it has to be guidelines, open source guidelines for this testing. Also, we need to educate public on the dangers of AI-powered surveillance and why the proprietary AI-powered surveillance will lead to this Orwell scenario quicker than anything else. We need to promote the adoption of open source tools and privacy-first technologies as much as we can. And that's what I'm doing during these events for a long time. And just think about that and have it in the back of your mind. So also we need to help open source companies to gather some funding to develop their projects and products, because that really helps them to not only to develop the product, but also to push their idea so people understand it, to market the idea why open source in this or that domain is good, particularly in AI. This is very, very, very important. Share the knowledge, talk to your friends like this presentation, discuss it with your family, I don't know, and get the understanding of that. And the most funny part, all of this tooling, open source tooling, exists, it's free, and it's most of the time it's way better than the proprietary. The only downside it has, it's a little bit less user base, even though the user base is more powerful than the other user base, and it's a little bit less marketing. So because of less marketing, or actually it's a lot less marketing, because of less marketing, a lot of people don't know about it, of course. And there's not a single way to induce the will to try open source tools, unfortunately. So we need to do it more, and of course, there is some learning curve to it. But I would say if you pass basic stepstones, 1, 2, 3 basic stepstones of learning, if you have a general idea of how tech works, how some technical systems work underneath, some basic idea, you don't have to have very deep knowledge. Then you can understand why open source is so important, and then especially for AI. Okay, so automated auditing, I already discussed that, so let's move on. What else we can do? So again, push the government for transparency and using open source tooling. Ensure that it is used not only for AI, but also for development, for all the processes, generation, software packaging, delivering the software, networking, accounting, everything. It should be fully open source. If there's some pieces that are not open source, I would personally say we should just ignore this. Do not trust this product whatsoever. So build coalitions to lobby for stronger privacy laws and regulations. FSF, Free Software Foundation, Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF. A lot of associations work on that. Support them. Fund them, I don't know, send them $10, 100 NOK. Support them, get their t-shirt, something, talk about them, discuss. There's many other freedom foundations in the world that are really good and they're trying to push for privacy laws and protection laws, freedom laws, whatever you want to call them. Equip individuals with tools. That's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to pass my knowledge and equip you guys with tooling to know how to protect your digital privacy. So if you're going for a particular tool, go to alternativetool.net and just type in your tool name and try to see what are the open source tooling, what are the best voted. Try one or two of them, see if they fit in your pipeline. If they do, just use it in your pipeline, and you will get more freedom, and it will be free, and it will be better. And if it's not better, join the community and help developers improve it to the point when you can use it in your pipeline. Also find ways to disallow proprietary AI. I don't really know how that could be done, but at least, you know, maybe with taxes in some countries it could work. If you push the taxes higher, like if you're using, like with tobacco or with alcohol, very good, it's working. So we should say, okay, if you're using proprietary products, pay more taxes. And it's a very good thing, because then proprietary companies will say, oh, you know, we're under this law, so we have to pay the taxes, which is higher in our case. That will push the price even further, and it will like make these markets even further apart, and more people and more enterprises will move to full open source because of this issue here. So high taxes would work absolutely if somebody would ever try, and I think government should be happy, because with proprietary companies they have a lot of money, like OpenAI. If you're gonna say, Norway gonna say, okay, OpenAI, if you're gonna work in Norway, you're gonna pay tax, I don't know, 49%, whatever it is. Whatever they decide, I'm not a politician. So, I mean, maybe OpenAI would negotiate and say, okay, 40%. And yeah, that should work. And there's a lot of money to government to gain here, and to use this money on supporting open source development inside of the country, and then kind of pushing this like proprietary things away. Of course, you can also protest and tell governments your opinion. That's what we have to do, and that's luckily the Norwegian community in general is very good, or sort of good at it, I would say. We have a lot of opinions, we have a lot of protests, so that's kind of good. The only problem here is that this problem is not that obvious. It doesn't matter. Well, it's obvious for me, maybe it's obvious for some of you, but for some people it's not that obvious. So we have to like tell people why is this important. Okay? Yeah. So fortunately, there are some like frameworks, documents, ideas that are addressing what I just said. There are some solutions, there are some frameworks, some websites. I will share the links really soon. So it's not all lost. There's a lot of materials that we can already use, and this is really great. So you can go to this website, oecd.ai, and look at some of the pages on that website. So they are kind of understood this issue and the problem, and they addressed it in their own way. So I'm not actually sure if they are getting donations. Maybe they do. So maybe that would be another nice company to support, or to talk about, the problems at least that it reveals. Okay, so lastly, speaking a little bit about AI developer dilemma. So this basic choices between open source ecosystem and proprietary ecosystem. So that's the AI developer dilemma. And the thing is, a lot of companies initially use proprietary models and solutions to learn about AI potential and to minimize early capital expenditure. So, of course, they want to just jump on the ship, right? If you're making a startup, it's way easier for your startup to just go to OpenAI models and just ingest all of the data from there, just use it in your processes. However, for broad, sustained deployment, in many cases, companies would use actually ecosystem-based open source solutions, which allows for more cost-effective, adaptable strategy that aligns with evolving business needs and industry trends. So the thing is here that, of course, more companies understand that they need to use open source, and a lot of them use it. But we can also talk to these companies. If you work in there, if you know somebody, just talk to them, discuss with them this particular problem, and suggest to use maybe a little bit less developed open source model, which in 1 year or 2 years might become way more developed than the proprietary model. And that happened many times with like models for coding, with the models for languages, including Norwegian language and some other languages. So it happens all the time. So we just need to use more open source and try to push the developers into it as quick as possible. We don't even need to start with proprietary solutions nowadays. If we have enough like processing cycles, if we can, like before trying something, we can think like a couple of seconds how we can actually try it, and then decide where we're going to try it and how we can try it. Okay, so wrapping up this talk, a lot of information to consume and to understand. These are some of the links. Again, You can make a photo of this slide. The presentation is going to be published, of course, as always on our website. Just take the data, whatever, do whatever you like with it. It's public domain, so totally free to use it however you like. Yes, and I hope you find it a good food for thought. And I'm also hoping it will fire up some discussions in the networking session that we will have right after I finish this presentation. Okay, so last thing I would like to do is I would like to ask you guys if you have any questions, comments, feedback, thoughts. Just raise up your hand. I will run with mic so you can be on the stream. Come on, I'm not biting. Just anything, any thoughts, any. Okay.
So for the most part, I just have one question. That is like, you were suggesting that we should move, like at least the government should move to all open source, right? Respectfully, it's a bit too much to ask, right? For one, it's like, how far do you want to go, right? Even if you're considering operating systems or browsers, right, or ChatGPT, a lot of tools like the paid ones, right, are not necessarily paid, but even in general, the proprietary ones are just much better, right? They give much better experience. They're much more user-defined because, of course, there is an incentive for the companies to make better products, right? Compared to open source, where it's just a couple of guys helping around and they're off time, right? So in the same case, like if there's a bug in some big proprietary software, right, it's going to get fixed much quicker. The company has more incentive and it has more leverage and it has more stakes on the line, right, compared to the open source. So, I mean, it's a good idea, but moving everything,
I see what you mean, and I partially agree. At least the situation is like that right now for some particular points. But the thing is, with open source, it's not that we don't have better solutions. We do have better solutions in open source, or okay, at least comparable, maybe not better. Sometimes they are better, sometimes they are worse, but in average, let's say it's comparable. So we have for operating systems, 100%. We had that ages ago. Actually, I would say Linux is better than any other OS. About from 2004 or 6 or 7. Okay, so let's say 13, 14, 15 years maybe. Yes, so browsers the same. Like you have Brave, Chromium based, but Chromium is mostly open source. Then we have Firefox, mostly open source. Like there's some binary blocks, but there's fixed versions of the Chromium, ungoogled Chromium, you know that, and also Firefox CSR, which has like 100% open source. There's also distros that are 100% open source. And speaking about like working experience, I would personally say most of the time it's better. It sometimes can be more challenging to learn it. It will be different, yes, but it's also different if you're wearing a t-shirt or a shirt, right? Because the first time you put on a shirt or a t-shirt, it's going to be a different experience. But what is the one better or the other? Both of them are nice, right? But it's a different workflow you need to learn. And speaking about the bugs, here actually is the part where I totally don't agree with you, at least for my experience, for several reasons. One reason is that open source is always, you have more eyes looking at the code, more eyes looking at the bugs, more hackers trying to break it because the code is open, it's simpler to automate, code audit and try to find bugs. Also getting bug hunting actually, oftentimes a lot of this EFF foundation, like these foundations, they give away money, or the companies that, like Grafana, let's say Grafana, they have communities that give away money as a bug bounty programs, and they give a lot of money. A lot of proprietary companies have no bug bounty programs, or a lot of companies even follow people who find bugs to try to tell them not to share this information. With Prism, it's been like that. So like OWL Messenger, it used to be tracked by government and everybody knew it, but everybody was forced to shut their mouths. So basically in proprietary, you can hide whatever you want, and a lot of bugs in proprietary software, although they can be not pronounced, so they cannot be seen or very visible, but they could live for 10, 20, 30 years sometimes. In open source, this is almost, well, that also happens. I'm not lying here, it also happens, but it's way rare. That's way more rare. So if, again, returning to a question, should we push everything to open source? Yes. Would we be able to push everything into open source in like a click? No, but that is totally fine, because we don't all have to switch to a particular type of t-shirt tomorrow because the new type of t-shirt appeared. It is better, it's cheaper, it's better, you know, you don't sweat in it, it fixes everything, it's the best t-shirt. Would everybody buy it? Yes, of course. Would we take time to buy this t-shirt? Yes, of course, because a lot of people will say, no, this is not the best, no, we don't believe in science, you know, we don't believe in tech, we don't want this membrane stuff, you know. So there will be a lot of debate, a lot of people will push back, but people will start buying it and it will grow. So the same thing here, I'm not saying that we will switch in an instant, but we will switch slowly, and if we can switch slowly, we should try to do it. That's my opinion in here. So do we have any more questions, any more comments?
I would say that also, I mean, states are not passive actors. They have resources, they have pools of competence sufficient. Like, if they want, they can implement almost everything, and they can actively implement it. So they could take open source and make it in their own way. For example, they can adapt it to their needs. The difference between a company doing that and a state doing that is that the state has to answer to legal frames, transparency frames, judicial frames. You know, that force them to do that in a way that, okay, then maybe they do it anyway, but technically they cannot do it to damage you. Companies don't have to answer to that. That's strict. So I trust much more a state than implements open source into something simple than a company. That's right.
I agree, and there's actually samples of that. Like some governments moved to open source. Like I remember some governments. Germany, it was in Germany, it was in Russia, it was in India, it was in several countries. Some of them moved back and forth several times. Some of them fully transitioned. So it is happening in the world, and people understand it. And actually, even Norway and Russia as well have like frameworks that either allow or even enforce open source standards in a particular domains, like documentation. It used to be Microsoft Office. It's not anymore. It's open document text. It's like a lot of people don't know it, but official standard in Russia for documentation is open document text, which is the LibreOffice or whatever. So, and a lot of cases it's like that, and in a lot of countries it's like that. It's just people don't know about it, and they don't use it, but they actually legally they should use it. So I agree with you. State is a good motivator in that, and let's hope that they will act more on that and continue to build frameworks that will help them.
Also, companies answer to shareholders. Like the user base is a bank, basically, in that process. States answer to you.
Yeah, that's true. And shareholders mostly care about the money, basically. They care about themselves. So that's true. Do you have any comment? Anyone else, guys? No? No comments? No questions? Yes, one more? Okay.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on AI Act, which is coming, and how this will affect governments.
Well, I would love to invite an expert to talk on that, because I am not an expert and I have not read it entirely, unfortunately. So, well, there's always two sides to anything, right? And I would say we need some legislation for AI, and especially the legislation that is like very well shaped and formed and formulated, and what just I told you about, right, with the open source part. However, we also need not to kill the industry, because the thing with killing industry is that you're not going to kill it. It's going to survive, but if you pass this legislation in, let's say, 25 regions in the world, and it's really hardly enforced on everyone, and there's like a lot of court orders or a lot of limitations, and people are actually following it, there's going to be 200 more countries that are not following that. And at some point, for good or for bad, they're going to overcome, and they're going to be way better at everything. And in the modern economy, these countries that will limit themselves will just put themselves in a situation when they are underdeveloped because of their own limitations and laws. And we had a history like that already. I can't give you a right example from out of my mind right now, but it's been like that. with several issues. And of course now also we have ecological issue here, where we need to we need to produce more, yes, but we need to produce less, yes. We can have more population, but we need to produce less. So this flip side problem, and how it's sort of unsolvable. So sustainability problem, let's call it that. It's really hard to solve it, but I think with open source and with more education for people, when you try to explain what open source is and why is it important, it will be possible. And returning to the question of legislation, well, let's see how this is rolling out and how does it actually work. Because realistically, even in the countries that it's going to be enforced, it's probably not going to affect all the companies, because a lot of companies are just think tanks, closed think tanks, like this, this room or something. So we're trying to be an open think tank, but to be an open think tank, we need to be a larger audience. We need to have more, people on the stream, more people in the audience. Right now, we're more like closed think tanks, and there are some think tanks that are completely closed, and they are internal for the companies or for governments, and we don't know what they're going to do, and they then don't care realistically about legislative framework or any law or any framework until they will have to implement some of their ideas or some of their products into public sphere. And if they are INT company, like intelligence company, intelligence agency, they don't have to do it. They just could develop the tool for internal use and keep using it internally. So internally, in the country they're being, they kind of internally, actually, they're not following laws. But because of that isolation, so it's very gray. It's very gray. So they are not following the laws, but they are not doing anything against the law. So that's kind of that situation. So I don't know what to do with that situation and how it's going to change and how this law will affect everyone. But again, at least it should be discussed. Even if the wrong law is going to be passed, maybe it's a basis for improving and developing. I'm really hoping that we can step on it and develop better versions of it every time. But in general, I think we need to keep that in mind when we are developing. But we also need to keep in mind that we don't want to really be scared to develop and release something, because if we do that, again, we just become this weak nation that will not develop any innovations and will not proceed to the future. Any more questions? Okay, so then on this positive note, let's wrap it up, and thank you all guys for coming. Last thing I want to say, please don't leave, because we have a networking session that is going to be in Trekanten, which is if you exit the Regal building and you just see across the street, not through the train lines, but across the street, there's a Trekanten, which is a nice bar. There's some food in there as well, and we're going to be there for next half an hour, maybe 2 hours, depends. And we can continue talking on that subject and on the other subjects surrounding open source, surrounding AI. You can also ask me some questions about crypto, because usually here I'm talking about crypto, but today I'm not. But it is very much connected. Crypto is connected to AI, crypto is connected to open source. Most of the crypto nowadays are open source, and it's somehow connected to AI. And that's our future. Whatever we do, both of these topics are our future. And I'm hoping that even if Big Brother is watching us, we can be this Big Brother, right? Okay, thank you guys.